Is it possible that those concerns may be, mitigated by what we're seeing on the economic front? I mean, that's looking like a possibility as well.
Let's talk about the bank stocks. They're ripping higher. I'm looking at S&P sub-index of financials. They're up more than 4% today, and it's the biggest one-day gain since early April. I'm trying to understand if this is just a yield curve bet with the 210 spread at the highest since 2018, seeing a similar kind of widening in the 530 spread. Is that really what this is, or is it also optimism that perhaps will not be necessarily consumer defaults, delinquencies, and business will actually pick up?
One kind of gets you to the other to some extent. I mean, if you think about it, the idea that what we're seeing in the bond market is a reflection of what the jobs numbers are suggesting about the economy. And if indeed that holds up, and this is not just some 1 month wonder, then, consumers may well be in a better position than they were before in terms of being able to keep up payments, in terms of being willing to spend more. And as, all kinds of businesses open up as a result of the easing of the coronavirus pandemic, I mean, there's a potential for more business down the line coming out of that. So, it's kind of a both and as opposed to an either or in terms of, what's being reflected in the financial stocks at this point.
Hey, Matt, I'm just wondering, it's, again, this better than expected job number. We're going to have President Trump in moments doing a victory lap, a well-deserved victory lap for this number here, followed up by Larry Kudlow with John Farrow. What does that mean for the folks in Congress? Does that reduce the odds of getting this next round of stimulus, even though the need still may very well be there, as you listen to Governor Cuomo talk about the need for stimulus at the state and local level?
This is really just a multi-trillion-dollar question, I think, right? Because, like you said, there's some cross currents here. We're getting some mixed signals. And I think one of the interesting things about what we're seeing in the economy and the stock market is that, we've kind of been really holding out hope since the beginning of this pandemic that, things would turn out okay and maybe better than expected. There's so much uncertainty right now. And we don't really know much about, the nature of the virus itself. And so that kind of, leaves us to be able to hold out for hope. I just remember back to mid-March when initially the lockdowns were going to be 2 weeks, and then they were extended another 2 weeks after that. And we just kind of kept extending things every 2 weeks. And now we're in a situation where a lot of us are, maybe going back to eat at a restaurant for the first time in several months. And so that makes us feel good and, gives us some optimism. But we definitely have some key milestones or flag posts, I think, coming up here. The next big one for the economy is these extended or expanded unemployment insurance benefits that are set to expire at the end of July. So that's going to be a big, potential flashpoint for Congress to debate and keep an eye on that will determine how things go going forward.
Hey, Matt, thanks so much for joining us. We really appreciate your thoughts. Matt Boesler, Bloomberg Fed reporter. Also, Bloomberg Stocks editor Dave Wilson, thanks so much for your color here on this very strong jobs report and very strong equity markets. Right now, let's head down to Washington, D.C. for World and National Headlines with Nathan Hager. Nathan.
Well, Paul, we are awaiting a news conference from President Trump. He said he would be in the White House Rose Garden at 10 a.m. Wall Street time. We're 16 minutes past that. As soon as the president speaks, we will bring you his comments live. But it comes after a May jobs report that defied most every economist's expectation. 2.5 million jobs added in the month of May after a record 20.7 million jobs plunge in April. The unemployment rate fell from 14.7 to 13.3%. No economist surveyed by Bloomberg expected improvement in either figure. Though the numbers do show a racial divide in the labor market, black unemployment climbed to 16.8% last month, while the jobless rate among white Americans fell to 12.4%. That gap had been narrowing since 2011. The first memorial services have been held in memory of George Floyd more than a week after his death in police custody in Minneapolis. The Reverend Al Sharpton had some pointed words for President Trump at yesterday's memorial.
We cannot use Bibles as a prop. And for those that have agendas that are not about justice, This family will not let you use George as a prop.
More ceremonies are planned this weekend into Monday. President Trump doesn't plan to attend any of them, but the Floyd family has invited Joe Biden to the funeral in Houston. Biden is getting some attention for saying this during an online forum with black supporters last night.
Do we really think this is as good as we can be as a nation? I don't think the vast majority of people think that. There are probably anywhere from 10 to 15% of the people out there that are just not very good people. But that's not who we are. The vast majority of the people are decent.
Bloomberg's Kathleen Hunter reports this may harken back to another politically charged moment.
You remember Hillary Clinton's comment about the basket of deplorables that she referenced, which turned off, I think, a lot of voters and certainly gave an opening to Republicans that Trump and his campaign really seized upon.
New ABC News Ipsos poll shows only 32% of Americans approve President Trump's handling of the aftermath of George Floyd's death. 66% disapprove. Global news 24 hours a day on air and on Quick Take by Bloomberg, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Nathan Hager. Now let's get a check of the markets. Here's Bloomberg's Greg Jarrett with a Bloomberg Business Flash. Greg?
Looking good, Billy Ray. Nathan, the S&P index gains top 2% as it headed for a third weekly advance, while 10-year Treasury yields rose past 0.9%. Oil's up, gold's down, and the dollar holds at a 3-month low following data that show unemployment fell in May, and non-farm payrolls increased by 2.5 million. We look at those numbers every 15 minutes throughout the trading day here on Bloomberg Radio. S&P 500's up 2.25%, up 70. Dow is up 2.75%, up 716, and the Nasdaq is up 1.5%, up 147. The 10-year is down 30 seconds. The yield 0.92%. West Texas Intermediate crude's up 4.5% at 39.11 per barrel. COMEX gold is down 2.66%. At 16.81.50 an ounce. The dollar yen, 109.79. The euro, $1.12.99. And the British pound, $1.26.86. We continue now with Bloomberg Markets with Lisa and Paul.
Thank you so much, Greg Jarrett. Right now, I just got to say, Paul, I am looking at the KBW index of the banks, and it is surging 9% more than that, given the optimism here about the economy as well as the widening yield curve. And I will just say, I find it fascinating that the gap between 2 and 10-year Treasury yields, which is a measure of, frankly, the financial power that some of these banks have to borrow short-term and lend long-term, has widened to the most since 2018. So definitely showing how significant this rally is and how significant this reversal in sentiment is. And at the center of that is this jobs report. Massive surprise, Paul. An expected 7.5 million jobs expected to be lost. Instead, 2.5 million gained.
Just extraordinary. It kind of makes you think that there's something in those numbers that will probably come out over the weekend a little bit. But again, no matter how you slice it, a much better than expected number, and that's what we're seeing in the markets. All
right, and there's a question of exactly what these details are. And Tom Gimbel has been following this with a front row seat, CEO of global staffing company LaSalle Network. He sees the ongoings with respect to the rehiring of employees as the U.S. economy starts to reopen. Tom, fascinating numbers that came out today, absolutely blew away any and all projections by U.S. economists and frankly raised a lot of questions given the anecdotal data that we keep getting. Tom, what did you make of this information?
I think a lot of it's the PPP money. I think if I read the data correctly, the report, that a lot of the people coming back, or a decent percentage, were the furloughed folks, which means, and listen, beggars can't be choosers. We're adding people to work who weren't working, but these aren't newly created jobs. They're old jobs bringing people back, which is a positive sign, and to look at it any other way is crazy, and we should be very optimistic from this number.
So interesting, Tom. It's I think no matter, there are some nuances in this number, Tom, but is this signal to you kind of at the very least setting a bottom for the employment picture?
I'm not necessarily sure about that. I think for the short term, meaning 60 days, it's probably a bottom. But what we've got to see is what happens in the end of the third quarter and early fourth quarter. If the airline travel doesn't pick up and the airlines lay people off and hotels don't continue to grow, if we do get another spike from COVID and what happens in that regard to working in the restaurant service space, I think we could have another big hit.
Tom, I think it's fascinating to get your view. I know you've been more optimistic than a lot of economists have over the past months and years when we've had you on, and always added really good perspective. Right now, you sound less optimistic than a lot of people are when they take a look at these numbers. What are you seeing on the ground that's making you less optimistic?
So what's happened in a true recession, which I believe we're in, is companies stop hiring in volume. They have key hires they need to make, and they may get a new project and they bring people on, but there isn't growth for isn't hiring for future growth because they believe they're going to need it. And that belief is what's been fueling this bull market for 10 years, is that companies keep thinking it's going to get stronger and better, and it has been. And now what we've seen is companies are not hiring in volume. We're not seeing sales hiring, which is a really big indicator. When companies are building up their sales force, it means they're anticipating that there'll be more revenue growth, and that leads to other areas of the business. Not seeing that in volume. A few hires here and there, but again, not in volume, and that gives me some concern. And then temporary staffing, which we have a large business practice in that area, is usually a leading indicator. And it's not as terrible as the search business, but it definitely isn't starting to grow at the rapid volume that we've seen over the past 10 and really past 20 years. So I'm a little bit apprehensive. And then the liquidity issue is what's going to happen after the PPP money rolls off and companies don't have to keep their employees anymore. And if revenues aren't there, whether it's due to COVID, whether it's due to social unrest, are we going to have a situation where there's more bankruptcies?
Tom, this is an incredibly important conversation, frankly. What you are telling me finally is giving me some light. I've had so many questions this morning. This is one of the most confusing data dumps I have ever seen in my life. And even with the PPP taken into account, as Matt Boesler of Bloomberg News was just talking about, that still would only bring, it's still catastrophic, but it would bring the unemployment rate up to about 16%, still well below consensus. So is it that the market is better than people expected, but not as necessarily good as the headline numbers here imply? Or is it closer to what people had expected? We just aren't seeing that level of actual layoffs just yet.
Well, what we've seen is that the service level can only get hit so hard. That's the difference between restaurants and hospitality versus white collar, is if the restaurants lay everybody off, which is what essentially has happened, there is no more cutting. If you have a company, a Fortune 500 company that's done layoffs, like a Boeing or an airline or whomever else, they're not laying off the entire company. And that's what the restaurants have done for the most part. And so what we see now is there really isn't that much more room to go on the service side, on the hospitality side. So now it is, does part two of the real white-collar layoffs. We've had them, but we haven't had, if you eliminated all the service jobs and you just had the white-collar layoffs, it wouldn't be anywhere nearly as catastrophic. We'd probably be sitting at 7.5% unemployment, and it wouldn't be that bad.
So, Tom, do you expect that? Is that something, as you kind of survey some of the companies that you're in touch with, do you expect kind of more white-collar, office-level type of layoffs across the economy coming up?
Well, that'll be the really interesting thing, and we have to see. I mean, to me, that's the difference between the V curve versus the U or the L curve of do things bounce back. Now, the one opportunistic or optimistic, both probably, is the strength of the stock market, is seeing that the market is saying we're looking at companies from the long term. We're not looking at them month over month or even in the quarter, that we're saying who's a strong company and will they be strong at the end of this year and the early part of next year. And that lends me to believe that companies are going to have the liquidity to be able to hire people. So there is optimism on that. But I think all of the BLS numbers, until we get into the July report, the first week in August, are a little bit of smoke and mirrors to really see how things level off sans the PPP.
All right. So looking forward, there is a question about whether this report, given how much better than expected it was, whether it reduces the pressure on Congress to pass additional fiscal and stimulus, whether it takes the pressure off the Federal Reserve to keep its bazooka wide open. I'm totally conflating different metaphors there. I'm just wondering, though, from your perspective, how worried you are about that.
I 100% think that we should not do any more stimulus at the time being. I think the government overshot, quite frankly. Now, I'm not being critical of it from the standpoint of in a catastrophe, you have to do things at the moment, and it's easy to have 20/20 hindsight. But writing the check to everybody who makes under $75,000, employed or unemployed, really wasn't necessary. And what we saw was that people wanted to have jobs, and companies needed to have jobs. And the real challenge we're going to face in part 2 or part 3, however you look at it, is the federal stimulus on the unemployment and people who are making more money being unemployed in these service jobs than when they go back to work. That's where the dynamic's going to be felt come July.
All right, so Tom, we've had differing states have different kind of schedules for reopening their economies. Are we seeing any regional impact on employment data that might reflect that?
You know what, I'd be frank with you, I haven't had a chance to study that much, but I do think that from who I've been talking to, CEOs and finance and HR leaders in the southern, below the Mason-Dixon line, that it really is two different economies. And we're seeing that those areas, geographically speaking, are much more prone to be proactive and optimistic versus the northern states.
Just real quick here, Tom Gimbel, before we let you go, is there any white-collar sector that you are most concerned about from here that you expect would suffer the first or the next round of layoffs?
Here's the really interesting thing. For this recession versus the last two where I was running a business in 01 and 08 and 09, is this isn't sector-focused. It's company-focused across all sectors. So you could have an airline that actually ends up being okay, and the majority of others that are in the toilet, and that could be for every single company. I'm seeing it in insurance and technology and manufacturing, that many companies aren't doing great, but there's a few outliers that really are doing well. So, but if I had to put my finger on it, I would say that a lot of technology-based companies, I think you're going to see, if things don't pick up, are going to be laying people off, because their profits are lagging, and they don't have a lot of them don't have the funding to go out and just hire people. And that's a real interesting dynamic to non-profitable companies that exist in the tech space.
Hey, Tom, thanks so much for joining us on this historic Jobs Friday. Tom Gimbel, founder and CEO of LaSalle Network, based in Chicago, breaking down those numbers. Right now, let's head to let's get some business flash with Greg Jarrett. Greg, what do you have for us?
I've got a bag full of business flash for you, Paul. Stocks are jumping and treasuries are down after a better-than-forecast jobs report bolstered expectations for the economy to roar back from the coronavirus lockdowns. In fact, exuberance in American stocks is spurring speculators to unleash bullish bets in the options market at a rate unseen in almost a decade. Trading in contracts that wager on single names to increase in value has surged to the highest since 2011, with a whopping 2.3 million calls changing hands yesterday. That's according to SIBO. That's a Bloomberg Business Flash. Let's get right back to Bloomberg Markets.
Thank you so much, Greg Jarrett. President Trump taking the podium in the Rose Garden, addressing the nation after today's jobs report. Let's listen in.
This isn't just over the last few months. This is for 3.5 years. And it's a great thing. We were very strong. We had the greatest economy in the history of our country. We had the greatest economy in the history of the world. And that strength let us get through this horrible pandemic, largely through. I think we're doing really well. Vaccines, by the way, had a meeting yesterday on vaccines. We're doing incredibly well with that. I think you're going to have some very positive surprises. And therapeutics, likewise, we're doing extremely well. Cures, we're doing well. I think those two words really blend in with each other. But tremendous progress is being made on vaccines. In fact, we have ready to go in terms of transportation and logistics. We have over 2 million ready to go if it checks out for safety. And it's also, the nice part is we have 4 companies, I guess you could even say 7 or 8 companies that are doing some similar and some very different on the vaccine front, and some similar and some somewhat different on the therapeutic front. So tremendous progress is being made on that. And I think even without that, and I have to say, even without that, and I don't think you're going to be having to use that in the future, that statement, even without, because I think they're going to have it. But we're going to be back, and we're opening our country. And I hope that the lockdown governors, I don't know why they continue to lock down, because if you look at Georgia, if you look at Florida, if you look at South Carolina, if you look at so many different places that have opened up, I don't want to name all of them, but the ones that are most energetic about opening, they are doing tremendous business, and this is what these numbers are all about. And you have to remember one other thing very importantly. I think it's extremely important for you to remember that many of our states are closed or almost closed. Some of the big ones, New York, New Jersey, they're starting now to get open, I hope. And I hope they also use our National Guard. Call me. We'll be ready for them so fast their heads will spin. We did it in Minnesota. In Minneapolis, we were incredible. They were ripping that place apart. I love it. We had such success there, and they were ripping it apart. And I called the governor, and the National Guard went in, and one night it was over. You don't see the problem in Minnesota now at all, not even a little bit. You take a look at a great city, just a great city, Minneapolis, and it was under siege like nobody's ever seen, where people are running from a police department, the great police, and they were told to. They didn't want to run. They were told to. It's bad governing. And I'm not blaming the governor. I'm blaming the mayor. But we want to get all of this finished. This is a great tribute. What we're announcing today is a tremendous tribute to equality. We're bringing our jobs back. You know, when we had our tremendous numbers, and when we had just prior to the China plague that floated in, we had numbers the best in history for African American, for Hispanic American, and for Asian American, and for everybody. Best for women, best for people without a diploma, young people without a diploma. I mean, so many different categories. Our numbers were the best in almost every category. We had the most people working in the history of our country, almost 160 million people. We were never even close to that. So we had things that we were doing so well. And then it came in, but we're going to be back there. I think we're going to actually be back higher next year than ever before. And the only thing that can stop us is bad policy. Frankly, left-wing bad policy of raising taxes and Green New Deals and all of the things that you have been writing about long and hard. That will stop it like you wouldn't believe. And frankly, it's holding it back. If there were no possibility that can happen, and I like to be an optimistic person, I think we're looking very good. I think even before today, the polls that I've seen and the polls that we do were looking very good. But if we didn't have the possibility of having massively higher taxes like the Democrats want to do, and Green New Deals, which are totally ridiculous, frankly, ridiculous, and I'm a big environmentalist. I believe strongly in taking care of our environment. We have the cleanest air we've ever had, like over the modern era, which, let's say you go back 30 years, we have the cleanest air, the cleanest water we've ever had. We're setting all sorts of really good environmental records. We're very proud of that. But the Green New Deal would kill our country. The Green New Deal would have a devastating effect on the world. And it's not going to happen anyway because it's impossible for them to do it. If you ever look at what they want to do under the Green New Deal, it's like baby talk. But we are doing something that this was an important day because this shows that what we've been doing is right. And the reason it's been and is so good is because the body was strong. Our body was so powerful that we could actually close our country, save millions of lives, stop people very early on from China from coming in, because we stopped early at the end of January, very early, people coming from China who were infected coming into our country. It was a very hard decision to make. Almost nobody wanted me to make it. I would almost say nobody wanted me to make it. But we made that decision, and even my enemy said that was an extremely important. We saved tens of thousands of lives with that decision. So we did a lot of things, and then we really ended up with empty cupboards. We went into a ventilator period that the likes of which nobody's seen since the Second World War. We mobilized. Nobody's ever seen anything like it. And then we did tests. We're over 20 million, or very close, but I think we're over 20 million tests, more than anybody in the world. Germany is at about at 4, and South Korea is at 3.5. We're over 20. And by the way, when you do more testing, you have more cases. We have more cases than anybody because we do more testing than anybody. It's pretty simple. But this is outstanding what's happened today. Now, they thought the number would be a loss of 9 million jobs, and it was a gain of almost 3 million jobs. Nobody's ever seen anything. I think it was incredible in a couple of ways. Number one, the numbers are great, and this leads us on to a long period of growth. We'll go back to having the greatest economy anywhere in the world, nothing close. And I think we're going to have a very good upcoming few months. I think you're going to have a very good August, very good July, but a spectacular, maybe spectacular September, but a spectacular October, November, December, and next year is going to be one of the best years we've ever had economically. And if you look at the numbers, they bear it out. But we were strong. It's sort of like when you go in for an operation, if a person is healthy, we were healthy. We had the greatest economy in the world. We went in for an operation. We closed our country down. We closed it down. We saved possibly 2 million, 2.5 million lives. Now, it could have been 1 million lives. I don't think anything less than that. But if you think we're at 105 million today, the 105,000 today, that would mean at the lowest number, it would be 10 times that amount. And I think everybody believes the least, if we went herd, as they say. And if you look at Brazil, they're having a very hard time. And by the way, they kept bringing up Sweden. It's come back to haunt Sweden. Sweden's having a terrible time. If we did that, we would have lost 1 million, 1.5 million, maybe even 2.5 million or more lives. So we're at 105,000 lives. Big move closing it up. We also closed it up to Europe. Europe became very infected from China. A gift from China, not good. They should have stopped it. They should have stopped it at the source. But it's a gift from China, and a very bad gift. I will tell you that. And you do say, how come at Wuhan, where it started, and they were they were in bad trouble, but it didn't go to any other parts. It didn't go to Beijing. It didn't go to other parts of China. Then you say, how come it came out to Europe, to the world, to the United States? So it didn't go to China. They stopped it cold. They knew it was a problem. But they didn't stop it cold from coming to the United States, Europe, and the rest of the world. Somebody has to ask these questions, and we'll get down to the answer. You know, we made a great trade deal. Great. They're going to buy $250 billion worth of product. And by the way, they are online. They're doing okay. But the ink wasn't dry on that deal when the plague floated in. What's going on? A plague is floating in from China. What's going on? So the ink wasn't dry. So I guess I view the trade deal a little bit differently than I did 3 months ago. It's a great deal. I will say they are buying a lot from us, and in that way I respect. And getting along with China would be a good thing. I don't know if that's going to happen. I'll let you know. We'll let you know. I think they want to get along very much with us. But we built a tremendous thing, a tremendous power platform. So when it got ill, when we had a problem, we were able to cut it off, stop it, just like this. Stop it. Keep everyone inside. Keep them away. Keep them together, away, uninfected. And we saved millions of lives. And now we're opening, and we're opening with a bang. And we've been talking about the V. This is better than a V. This is a rocket ship. This is far better than a V. A V is wonderful. A V is this. They were talking about, will it be a V, a U, an L? They had no idea. And I was watching one of the shows, and I have great respect for the people. And they said, will it be 9 million in job losses? Will it be, what will be the number be? Will it be, are they going to report record numbers? Will we break 20%? What will the number be? And, you know, I don't know. Because we were in, and I don't think we're in that territory anymore, we were in uncharted territory. Nobody's ever had a situation like that. So the number was 9 million, and one of the people was getting, no, I think it's going to be 10 million. That's 10 million negative losses. And then somebody else said, no, we think it's going to be 8.7. 9.2, everyone was right around that number. This is great geniuses, and they are. I watch them all the time, and oftentimes they're right. Warren Buffett sold airlines a little while ago. He's been right his whole life, but sometimes even somebody like Warren Buffett, I have a lot of respect for him, they make mistakes. They should have kept the airline stocks, because the airline stocks went through the roof today, and others did too. The whole market went through the roof. But they said 9 million job losses, 9 million. It's what going to be. Are we going to break 20%? Are we going to break it? And then the numbers came in, and one of the folks that was reading the numbers said, wow, this is a great number. It's only 3 million job losses. And then reading it and said, I don't think I'm not reading this right. Let me look at it again. Oh, wait a minute. This is 3 million gain almost. 3 million jobs gained. And then they shouted out, one of them sort of semi-shouted out, is this a typo? I think it was probably the greatest miscalculation in the history of business shows. The history of business shows talking about Wall Street. And that's okay. But one of the reasons we're in this position is because we had such a strong foundation. So we were able to close our country, save millions of lives, open, and now the trajectory is great. Don't forget, New York is barely included, and that's one of our big ones. California is barely included because they're not open, and they should open. By the way, the mayor of Los Angeles wants to keep this thing closed for a long time. Look at what's going on in Florida. It's incredible. The job the governor of Florida has done, it's incredible. The numbers they're doing. You've got to open it up, and you do social distancing, and you wear masks if you want, and you do things. You can do a lot of things. You're getting closer together. Even you, I notice you're starting to get much closer together. It looks much better, I must say. You're not all the way there yet, but you'll be there soon. But it's a tremendous thing that happened, and the reason it happened is because we had a real strong patient. We had a patient that was so powerful, so strong, that we could close it and open. And I give you this analogy. Somebody told me yesterday, it was Larry Kudlow. He said, sir, this is like a hurricane. And we were worried. We didn't know, is this going to be a hurricane or a major, major recession? A major recession that's not artificially caused, because this was artificially closed. We just said, boom, closed. And everything just stopped. And also, you know what else stopped? Big numbers on death by doing it. And that's why I had to do it. We've made every decision correctly. But it's like we stopped. So it was an artificial closing. And then what happened, very incredibly, is the numbers go, and Larry was saying that with a hurricane, you have a horrible hurricane in Florida or Texas, and it's devastating. And then the hurricane goes away, and within 2 hours, everyone's rebuilding and fixing and cleaning and cutting their grass. And I've seen it in Texas. I've seen it everywhere. Texas had a massive one. Louisiana, hurricanes. Florida, hurricanes. But what happens is right after the hurricane, boom, and this is what this is. This isn't a terrible recession. I don't even mention the D word. I don't talk about the D word. I don't want to talk about it. Because every time someone mentions it, I don't like the D word. But if you had a really, really big, bad recession, it could take 10, 12. How long did it take in 1929? It took many years to recover from that. How long? Yeah, 10. I heard 10. I think longer than 10, but that's okay. I heard 14, 15 years. Larry says 10, so let's go with 10. But it takes a long time to recover. But a hurricane, you're back in business in 1 day, 2 days, 3 days, and it's devastating and it's hard. And this was a hurricane. And it's going to get better fast because a lot of the numbers that you see, they're early numbers. They're not even from this last month. And by the way, speaking of that, you had the greatest 50-day rally in the history of our exchanges. The greatest 50-day rally. And we have a lot of protesters. And we have something else, right? We have something else. We have a pandemic. We've made tremendous progress really on both. If you look at where we've come on both, we've made tremendous progress on both. Tremendous progress. But you're looking, and the people are now starting to return to work. So it's been an incredible thing to see. It's been a beautiful thing to see. The experts predicted that the economy would lose tremendous numbers of jobs. And, of course, from the beginning it has, but you're going to see how fast that's made up. I'm telling you, next year, unless something happens where the wrong people get in here, this can turn around. Your 401ks will go down to numbers. If people didn't get rid of stocks in their 401ks, they're almost even. Think of it. With the pandemic and with one of the worst things that's ever happened, our country's never lost 105,000 people. Whether it's World Trade Center, which was 2,900, or Pearl Harbor, which was less than that. We've never lost anything close to this. But it's not only our country, it's the whole world. The world is suffering so badly. 186 countries at this moment. And that affects us too. But we're a positive force. We're the key to the world, in a sense. And the fact that we're doing well, I see already they're starting to do much better in other parts of the world. That's a great thing. Because we're working with the world. And we'll work with China too. We'll work with everybody. But what happened should have never happened. So we had a tremendous morning, a tremendous announcement. It was shocking to even great pros. I watched Maria Bartiromo. I watched Jim Cramer. I watched a lot of people. Joe Kiernan, he was pretty positive. Charles Payne, he was very positive for a long time. A lot of people got it right. They had confidence in me. They had confidence in this team, and they got it right. I think that's the only thing they could base it on, because we were on uncharted territory. I'd like to just say that renewal, restoration, recovery of the most vulnerable areas of America is going to be my focus. It's going to be a big focus because it's taking care of itself, but we have to help that very vulnerable area. They're vulnerable. It's not right, and we're helping them, and we have helped them in the past. And we're also into opportunity zones, criminal justice reform. Nobody's ever done for the black community what President Trump has done. Think of it. Historically, black small colleges and universities, they would come here for money every year for many, many years. After 3 years, I said, why are you doing this? Why do you keep coming here? They said, because we come. I said, don't you get a long-term deal so you don't have to come? The head of one of the very respected colleges looked at me and said, sir, we're like beggars. Every year we have to come to Washington and beg for money. I said, you should have a long-term deal. And we signed a long-term deal so they don't have to come. I'll miss them. I told him, I'll miss them. I got to know them. But the first year, I didn't think anything of it. The second year, I said, that's strange. Why are you here? And then the third year, not so long ago, the same people, the heads of the historically black small colleges and universities, 44 people, maybe a little more than that, a little less than that sometimes. But after 3 years, I said, what are you doing? They said, the past administration did nothing for us. The administration before that did nothing for that. So I'm going to do it. So we did the opportunity zones with Senator Tim Scott, who's been fantastic. And by the way, it's one of the great unknowns, because the opportunity zones, you don't talk about. It's one of the most incredible success stories ever in terms of the inner cities and in terms of black and Hispanic and Asian unemployment. Opportunity zones, you ought to do some stories about opportunity zones. Billions and billions of dollars of private money are being invested in putting people to work and getting money that they've never made. Some governors may need a little help yet, but I think for the most part they're in good shape. We have fantastic military. We have fantastic National Guard. National Guard was barely used. And these people have done an unbelievable job. They helped the Secret Service at Washington. Secret Service, by the way, are unbelievable. The job they did at the White House is unbelievable. There was never any form of like, oh, gee, this sounds dangerous. All I could see is what I was seeing on television. They were outside, and the Secret Service was incredible. But we were also helped by the D.C. police, and we were helped by the National Guard. It was unbelievable. They came in, and this was like a piece of cake. And I really am suggesting, because if you look at Minnesota and the great success we had there and other places, suggesting to some of these governors that are too proud in New York, I mean, you see what's going on there. Don't be proud. Get the job done. You'll end up looking much better in the end. Call in the National Guard. Call me. We'll have so many people, more people than you have to dominate the streets. You can't let what's happening happen. It's called dominate the streets. You can't let that happen in New York, where they're into stores and all of the things. And by the way, hurting many small businesses. You can't let it happen. Equal justice under the law must mean that every American receives equal treatment in every encounter with law enforcement, regardless of race, color, gender, or creed. They have to receive fair treatment from law enforcement. They have to receive it. We all saw what happened last week. We can't let that happen. Hopefully George is looking down right now and saying there's a great thing that's happening for our country. There's a great day for him. It's a great day for everybody. This is a great day for everybody. This is a great, great day in terms of equality. It's really what our Constitution requires, and it's what our country is all about. I just want to finish by saying, to save the economy, we passed several pieces of critical legislation, totaling many trillions of dollars, meaning 3. We're set up to do more if we want. I think we should, because we are dominant. For many years, as a bystander, somebody that loved government, somebody that loved this country, I would watch and study and see and just, when I say study, naturally study by watching. But if you go back, China was going to catch us in 2019. And that was like a given. You go back 5 years, 6 years, 7 years. It was always China will catch America, catch the United States in 2019, and then it'll become the dominant economy. Never happened. It's not going to happen. We dominated them over the last year and a half, 2 years. We took in tens of billions of dollars